Now, what I want to do here before we continue reading, I just want to remind you where we are in the text. So the text we're reading is Matn al-Aqidat An-Nasafiyyah, but we haven't read the actual text itself in a while because we've been reading the explanation. But one thing you always want to do when you take an explanatory book is to relate the explanation back to the text. Sometimes the explanation is extensive, while the text is supposed to be brief, so to be easy to memorize. So what did the author say in the text that got us to where we are? So he said, if we just look at the text real quick by itself, Imam Abu Hafs Najmuddin Umar ibn Ahmad An-Nasafi As-Samarqandi Al-Maturidi said, he said, and I'll just read the English, the people of the truth declare the realities of things are confirmed. So you know what that means. And knowledge about them is verified. So you know what that means. As opposed to the sophists, you know who they are. The causes of knowledge for a creation are three: sound senses, accurate news, and intellect. That's all clear. As for the senses, they are five: hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. By each of these senses, there is discovery of that for which it was installed. Yani, you detect by your senses, by each sense, whatever that sense was installed for. Accurate news is of two kinds. One of the two is the successive mass report, tawatur, which is the confirmed word-of-mouth report by a folk whose conspiring to a lie is inconceivable. You know what that means, inshallah. It is a dictator of necessary knowledge, like the knowledge of the kings of old in past ages and of remote lands. The second is something told by a messenger aided by a miracle. It dictates deduced knowledge, because the miracle is the evidence that made you know that the prophet who did it is telling the truth. Knowledge established this way is comparable to knowledge established by necessity, incertitude, and confirmation. With regards to the mind, it is a source of knowledge also. Anything established by the mind, by intuition, is necessary, like knowing that all of something is more than some of it. Anything established by the mind by inference is learned. And inspiration is not a source of cognizance of something's correctness, according to the people of the truth. The world, together with all of its constituents, all of its elements, is originated, yani created, in that it is, yani because it is made up of units and properties. Units are what have independent standing. It is either a compound, which is actually a body, yani, so compound means a compound of atoms, or it's singular, like a mere atom, which is the piece that cannot fracture, can't be broken into pieces. It's too small. The property is what does not have independent standing. You know what that means? And rather occurs in bodies and atoms, like colors and the four states of being. Inshallah, you remember what the four states of being are. If not, then review. And flavors and odors. And the world's event creator is Allah. Exalted is He. The unique, the eternal, the alive, the all-powerful, the knowledgeable, the hearer, the seer, the willing. He is not at all a property, nor a body, nor an atom, nor depicted, nor limited, nor numbered, nor compounded, nor divided, nor constructed, nor finite. He is neither described with typicality nor with modality, He is not situated in a place, nor does time lapse on him, and nothing resembles him. This is where we are. وَلَا يَتَمَكَّنُ فِي مَكَانٍ. He is not situated in a place. Now from here, his not being situated in a place, because this is just the bare metin, the Shaykh explained these words, that he's not situated in a place. So this is just the metin we're looking at. Let's see the actual explanatory book. The author says, وَلَا يَتَمَكَّنُ فِي مَكَانٍ. He is not situated in a place. And then the explanation of that, the Shaykh goes on to explain. So here, all this page here is for explaining that. And then this page here doesn't fill up the whole page. And then the Shaykh inserted a section to go further into this topic. This is a section about proving the negation of motion and stillness and connection to the world and disconnection from the world and parallelism from the creations. That all of that is negated from Allah by producing documentations from the famous ones of the four madhabs. So that's what we've been reading. That starts here on page 71. And now the Shaykh goes on and on here. And we are here, page 92. So about 20 pages of this section here. This section which is for complementing the statement of the author. وَلَا يَتَمَكَّنُ فِي مَكَانٍ. He is not situated in a place. So this is where we are. And we're going to continue from here, reading this subsection here, until the Shaykh finishes saying all of what he wants to say, and then we'll get back to the original text. And so he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him. فَإِنْ قِيلْ. If it were said, كَيْفَ يُعْقَلُ مَوْجُودٌ قَائِمٌ بِالنَّفْسِ لَيْسَ بِدَاخِلِ الْعَالَمِ وَلَا خَارِجٍ مِّنْهِ. Yani, if it were said in objection to us, how could some existing thing be conceived, though, yani, some existing thing that is independent, it is self-existent, but neither inside of the world nor outside of it. How could something like this even be conceivable? قلنا, we answer, عرفتم استحالة ذلك ضرورة أم دلالة. Have you known the impossibility of this by necessity or by inference? So this answer means that the question that was posed is taken as a denial. Actually, it's a question. Kaifa, how? That's for asking a question. But not every question is literal. Sometimes a question is rhetorical. Like sometimes a question is to actually make a statement. And here the question is for denial. How would something that's existent, self-existent, how could it be conceived without being inside of the world nor outside of the world? As if this asker is saying, this is inconceivable. So it's a denial. So then, but there should be a question mark here. There should be a question mark here, although it's not a literal question, but it is a question. So then the response came addressing this as a denial, not just simply answering the question that came, but not beating around the bush, removing the interrogatory facade. Yani has the face of a question, but it's really, the question is a mask, and beneath that mask is a denial. So it's just taking off the mask. Qulna, we respond to this denial. عرفتم استحالة ذلك ضرورة أم دلالة. Have you known the impossibility of that by necessity or by inference? Because here in this answer, it's saying, how do you know that this is impossible? So someone might say, where does it say anything about impossible in the question? And maybe even the person who posed this question to you would say to you, I never said it's impossible. That's how people play games with you. Then you're going to make the decision whether you're going to talk to this person now that he's playing games with you, he's taking you for the fool, or if you're not going to talk to him. Yani, you're going to overlook this transgression here that he may or may not be aware of that he's doing, and just talk to him anyway. Or you're going to think that maybe you're wasting your time with a clown and you're not going to talk to him. So the answer that's provided here to this question, which is really a denial, just brings the denial right out. We answer, have you known the impossibility of that necessarily or by inference? And you know what it means to know something by necessity, and you know what it means to know something by inference. That's how you put your lessons together. So what's known by necessity? What does that mean? It means you know it intuitively or without thinking about it, that is. You know it without thinking about it. So when you, Yani, for all intents and purposes say that it's impossible that there would be someone existent, self-existent, without being inside of the world or outside of the world, then this impossibility, you knew it without thinking about it, or you knew it by inferring and deducing it. You thought about it and you put the facts together and you came to a conclusion that this is impossible. وَقَدْ أَوْضَحْنَا مَعْنَا مُبَايَنَتِهِ بِالنَّفْسِ. We have already clarified the meaning of God's being unique in himself, or Yani, his self being unique. We have already clarified what this means. It means he doesn't have a body or form or shape. He's not made of particles and he doesn't have dimensions. He exists without a place and he exists without a direction. So therefore, it is conceivable that there is a self-existing one who's neither inside of the world nor outside of the world. وَهَكَذَا الْجَوَابُ عَنْ قَوْلِهِمْ. And this is the way to answer their saying, خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَالَمَ فِي نَفْسِهِ أَمْ مُبَايِنًا عَنْهُ? Question mark. This is the way to answer this other thing they say. Did Allah create the world within himself or separate from himself? So then what was the answer produced here? خلقه على مقدار نفسه أو أكبر منه أو أصغر أو فوق نفسه أو تحته. So the answer here is also a question. It's a rhetorical question. So what's happening here is the one who's responding to these questions is not giving straightforward answers according to the question. The first question was, how could such a being be conceived? So the answer would be, if you just take the question at face value, it's conceivable by this explanation. But it didn't say, the answer didn't come here, it's conceivable by this explanation. Rather, the answer came here as a question. How do you know the impossibility of this? Which means, it's not even impossible. But you think it's impossible? Did you did you know that necessarily, or you arrived at that by some deduction? And then another question came. It's not another question that came, but it's a similar question. And what the Shaykh is telling us is that you answer this similar question with a similar answer. The similar question is, did Allah create the world within himself or separate from himself? So to this question we respond with also a rhetorical question, not straightforward answer by taking the question by face value. Rather, we're not going to take the question at face value because we're not naive. So, did he create it? If that's your question, then our question to you is, did he create it as it's the same size of himself, or bigger than himself, or smaller than himself, or over himself, or under himself? Well, they already believe he created it under himself, but what about the other things? They believe he created the world under himself, and they don't see that this means that he's like the creations. But what about this part? Bigger than himself or smaller than himself or the same size as himself? Because when they asked, did he create the world within himself or separate from himself? Their conviction, because we're not dealing with pantheists here. Pantheists believe that the world and God are one and the same. This is not the people we're dealing with. We're dealing with Jihawiyah. This means the people who believe that God is in a particular direction. So you who believes that the world is not God, and you don't believe that God created the world within himself, and that instead he created the world outside of himself, and if you are the people that we usually deal with, you believe he created it below himself, well, we're going to add a question for you. He created it as the same size of himself, or smaller than himself, or bigger than himself? So this is what the Shaykh taught us here. We know all of that's impossible, and we address this argument. But so what are we going to take here? Some lessons in how to deal with some people, lessons about how to take statements. Usually I'm going to take a question at its face value. That's what I always tell you. Someone asks you a question, then just answer his question, for example. Here, Shaykh, he gave us another style. But when you want to consider your time, and if you want to take this style, you need to think about what it's going to lead to. Here, for example, it's on paper and we're learning. But if you do it in real life and you ask him, well, did he create it the same size as himself, or bigger than himself, or smaller than himself? Doesn't mean he's going to be stumped by this question, even though we know he doesn't have a good answer. He might just tell you something that's stupid. Now, you're going to quit the conversation, or are you going to address his stupidity? ثم نقول, we furthermore say, حروف الظروف إنما تستعمل في الأجرام المحدودة. We furthermore say prepositions like words like in, on, over, etc. Prepositions are only used in a literal sense for things with limited volume. When you say in a literal sense, that's for something with a limited volume. وَكَذَلِكَ الدُّخُولُ وَالْخُرُوجُ. Also, using inside and outside in a literal sense, min هذا القبيل. They also are like this, that if you use them in a literal sense, it's going to be for volumes, things of limited volume. Well, what's alternative to using them in a literal sense? Like, for example, if you say the saying of Allah, Afillahi shak, is there a doubt in God? So here's in God. Yani, is there a doubt in Allah? Fi Afillahi shak, in God, in Allah, is there a doubt? So in, this word is a preposition. And The literal sense of the word fi that I'm translating as in is Wafiyyah. That means envelopment. Envelopment, that means being inside of something. In. But it's clear for you here that we're not talking about that. Excuse me. We're not talking about physical envelopment when we say, is there a doubt in God? Here, in means like about. Is there a doubt about God? So we can use prepositions for Allah Ta'ala, but not in a literal sense. This is what Wahhabis do. They believe he's in the sky. They believe he's over the arsh. So for them, over, they don't want it to mean it majestically or greatly. They want it to mean physically. When they're going to leave out the word physically, and then they're going to say other things that mean that. Like literally. And also inside and outside. They have this same issue. If you use them in a literal sense, then it refers to things of limited volume. But you might use those words not with that meaning. For example, the scholar said, Allah's attributes exist. If you translate their statement, لها وجود في الخارج. لها وجود في الخارج. So if you translate it literally, it would say Allah's attributes exist outside. And we know he exists without a place. So what does outside here mean? It means beyond your mere conception. It's not something limited to your own conception. It's not something limited to your own understanding. Yani, outside means outside of your body, and it doesn't mean in a place though. Outside of yourself, but still doesn't mean a place. Means, but not something that is merely by, it's not something confirmed just by your conception. God really exists despite our conception. Some scholars express this real existence of God, which is without a place. His real existence that's not restricted to or because of or due to our conception as wujudun fil kharij. Outside means beyond our mere conception. So that doesn't mean has a place. وَكَذَلِكَ الْمُمَاسَّةُ وَالْمُبَايَنَةُ. And likewise, al-mumassa, touching, and al-mubayana, and distinction. So, for example, Allah Ta'ala, there's statements in the Quran, if you translate them literally, it would mean he touches you with good. He touches you with evil. This doesn't mean that he's a body touching you. And when a person's not strong in language, then these types of statements are troubling. Say he touches you with good. They say, don't say he touches. Because they don't understand the language. Even their own language, they don't understand. Although before they learned with the details, the correct details, when they heard such statement, before they learned, such statements wouldn't have bothered them. They would have understood. After they learned, for some reason, for some people, even though they learned, they stopped understanding how they used to understand. So if someone were to say to them, God touches you with good, they never would have understood before that means he's a toucher and you're the touched. But they would have understood that it means he bestows the good upon you, or he inflicts the evil on you. Then after they learned right belief, and they learned about people who compare God to the creations. And they learned about some rules of blasphemy. And their thinking changed because of their learning. They became, although they learned, they became like they don't understand language anymore. Naturally. It's like they don't have natural understanding of language anymore. So this touching, in a literal sense, it's going to be for something with a volume. And wal mubayina, also, which I translated as distinction, in a literal sense, it's going to be for being in a separate place. An isolated place means being isolated. But not in a literal sense, it means being different, being unique. People who believe that God is apart from the creation, yani the word is mubayana. Mubayana. That means being distinct. You said, I cut to the chase. I told a Wahhabi that Allah is not attributed with a physical existence. And he retorted that he is. Afterwards, he says, salam to me, and I never returned it. Yeah, that's how they are. They really believe that Allah is like the creations. How can some people think that we are extremists here? They are the ones who don't know the reality of these people. But a lot of Muslims, alhamdulillah, they benefited from the Shaykh's warning, giving priority to warning from the Wahhabis in particular, or else they would have slipped by the radars of many. Shiites are not slipping by people's radars, nor Ahmadiyya, but Wahhabis would, because look how they display themselves. He says, وَقَدْ أَجَبْنَا عَنِ الْمُبَايَنَةِ. We have already answered the right meaning of mubayana, being distinct. فَإِنْ قَالُوا. And so if they were to say, كَيْفَ يُرَى بِالْأَبْصَارِ مَنْ لَا يَتَحَيَّزْ وَلَا يَقُومُ بِالْمُتَحَيِّزِ. If they were to say, how would someone who's not contained and does not exist in containment be seen? So isn't that what Wahhabis would say to you? Once you explain to him or mention to him your creed that Allah exists without a place, then, especially if it's the first time he heard something like that, he will think for a moment after what you said wipes his imagination away, because he worships his imagination. So you wipe away what he's been worshiping in his own imagination. So then he would look at you puzzled and say, well, don't you believe that Allah can be seen? So this question is from this type of thinking. If it were said, how would someone be seen by the eyes if this one is not contained and he does not exist in containment? قُلْنَا الرُّؤْيَةُ عِنْدَنَا لَا تَقْتَضِي جِهَةً. We respond, seeing according to us does not dictate a direction. وَلَا مُقَابَلَةً. And seeing does not dictate counterposition. Counterposition, that means being across from someone. وَإِنَّمَا تَقْتَضِي تَعْيِينَ الْمَرْءِ. It merely dictates the existence of the seen. Ta'yin here means wujud. It merely dictates the existence of the seen. وَبِهَذَا تَتَمَيَّزُ عَنِ الْعِلْمِ. And this is how seeing is different from knowledge. فَإِنَّ الْعِلْمَ يَتَعَلَّقُ بِالْمَعْدُومِ وَبِالْمَعْلُومِ عَلَى الْجُمْلَةِ. For indeed, knowledge is related to the non-existent and is related to what's known generally. Yani, knowledge pertains to what exists and what doesn't exist. So something that doesn't exist could be known, while something that doesn't exist cannot be seen. or an issue that doesn't exist cannot be seen. He says, على الجملة تقدير وكذلك لا تقتضي اتصال شعاع بالمرئي. And likewise, seeing, according to us, does not dictate the connection of light rays to what is seen. فهي كالعلم أو في معناه. And so in this way, seeing is like knowledge, or equivalent to it, as significant as it. He's saying in one way, seeing is like knowledge, and in another way, seeing is not like knowledge. Seeing, or knowing, seeing is like knowing when, or let me say, sorry, let me follow his order here. Seeing is unlike knowing because knowing pertains to what doesn't exist, while seeing does not pertain to what doesn't exist. Seeing does not pertain to what doesn't exist. But seeing is like knowing in another way, which is that seeing does not, according to us, dictate that the seen one is being touched by light rays. Just like knowing, you can know something without light rays touching what's known to you. We say something can be seeable without light rays touching it. And also, you can know something without it being in a direction. We say you can see something without it being in a direction. فإن قيل, so if it were said, ألستم تقولون الإدراك يقتضي نفس المدرك? If it were said, don't you people say that realizing something dictates the realized thing itself, dictates confirmation of the realized thing itself? Don't you say that realization dictates confirmation of the realized one itself or himself? قلنا, we say, لا يقتضي تعينه. Realization does not dictate that the realized one is actually, or a realized thing is actually existent. ولا تحديده, nor that whatever is realized has edges. Realizing something doesn't necessitate that whatever is realized has edges. So look how the answer came for this question. The question is, don't you say that realization dictates confirmation of the realized one or thing? So in the mind of Wahhabi means, don't you say that realization means that something has a body? Their minds are crippled. So we say realization doesn't dictate that the realized one or thing is existent, nor that the realized one or thing has edges. So what is this realization? Idrak. Idrak is something broader than knowledge, and it's broader than hearing or sight, because all of those fall under idrak. So idrak, in its broad meaning, does not dictate existence of what's realized, of the mudrak. Idrak, realization, does not dictate existence of the mudrak, the realized, because idrak includes knowledge. Some idrak does dictate the existence of the mudrak, the realized one, like sight and hearing. for something to be seen or heard needs to exist. But to be known does not need to exist. Needs here means is necessary that it would be. فَإِنْ قَالُوا, so if they were to say, كَيْفَ يُدْرَكُ وُجُودُ الْإِلَهِ سُبْحَانَهُ, if they were to say, well, how is the existence of God realized? Exalted is He. قُلْنَا لَا كَيْفِيَّةَ لِلْأَزَلِي, we say to them, the Eternal One doesn't have some way about Him. Yani, these answers here to these questions are not merely addressing the question at face value. These answers are taking into account the situation of the asker. The asker in this case being a mushabbih, someone who believes that God has limits and that He has attributes like the creations. It's like he's trying to find the kink in our armor. He's trying to show us that really God is like something in some way, and He's going to throw questions at us from different angles so He can catch us. But His questions are vague. Vague in comparison to His actual conviction. He hides something all the time. So these answers that are coming are bringing out whatever He might be hiding, consciously or subconsciously hiding. So if it were said, if they said to us, كَيْفَ يُدْرَكُ وُجُودُ الْإِلَهِ, how would God's existence be realized? So in his mind, we're denying God's existence. And we are saying something that's irrational. He's saying no place, no direction, no shape, no form. كَيْفَ هَذَا, how could this be? How could God's existence then be realized? So قُلْنَا, we answer him. Not by saying, for example, if we want to answer this question just at face value, we'd say, God's existence is realized by inferring His existence from the fact that He created things, the fact that creations exist. Creations exist, so then we knew God existed by rational evidence and not by imagination. It's like he's saying, how could you conceive God exists without imagining something? So the answer that we're being given here to such a question is addressing this person's problem. So the answer is, قُلْنَا لَا كَيْفِيَّةَ لِلْأَزَلِي. We say there is no way about the Eternal One. The one who's eternal doesn't have some mode or way or form about Him. وَلَا حَيْثُ لَهُ, and He wouldn't be anywhere. وَكَذَلِكَ لَا كَيْفِيَّةَ لِصِفَاتِهِ, and likewise, His attributes don't have some mode or way or how. وَلَا سَبِيلَ لَنَا الْيَوْمَ إِلَى الْإِخْبَارِ عَنْ كَيْفِيَّةِ إِدْرَاكِهِ. And we don't have any way to tell about how realizing Him would be, because there's no how for Him. وَلَا إِلَى الْعِلْمِ بِكَيْفِيَّةِ إِدْرَاكِهِ. وَكَمَا أَنَّ الْأَكْمَهَ الَّذِي لَا يُبْصِرُ الْأَلْوَانِ إِذَا سُئِلَ عَنِ الْمَيْزِ بَيْنَ السَّوَادِ وَالْبَيَاضِ وَالْإِخْبَارِ عَنْ كَيْفِيَّتِهِمَا فَلَا جَوَابَ لَهُ. Just like a colorblind person, if he were asked about the difference between black and white and to inform how they are, he wouldn't have an answer, because he never realized it. He never realized the difference between shades. كذلك نعلم أن من لا جهة له لا يشار إليه بالجهة. Likewise, we know that anyone who doesn't have a direction can't be pointed to in a direction. فإن قالوا, so if they were to say, من أبصر شيئا يمكنه التمييز بين رؤيته لنفسه وبين رؤيته ما يراه. So if they were to say, if someone saw something, he would be able to tell the difference between himself and what he's seeing. فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْإِلَهَ سُبْحَانَهُ. So if you saw God, this is what they're saying to us. كَيْفَ تُمَيِّزُونَ بَيْنَ الْمَرْئِيَيْنِ. How would you tell the difference between the two seen ones? How would you tell the difference between God and yourself? They're attacking our creed here, saying you basically believe God's nothing. That's how they believe that we believe. So if you saw God in your claim, according to your creed, how could you tell the difference between himself and you? قُلْنَا مَنْ لَا جِهَةَ لَهُ لَا يُشَارُ إِلَيْهِ بِالْجِهَةِ. Someone who doesn't have a direction, you cannot point to him in a direction. وَمَنْ لَا مِثْلَ لَهُ لَا إِيضَاحَ لَهُ بِالْمِثَالِ. And someone who doesn't have a likeness, he can't be clarified by an example. وَمَنْ لَا أَشْكَالَ لَهُ فَلَا إِشْكَالَ فِيهِ. And anyone who doesn't have a shape, then there wouldn't be any difficulty in telling the difference between him and the one who has a shape. وَنَقُولُ لَهُمْ. And we furthermore say to them, أَنْتُمْ إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْإِلَهِ كَيْفَ تُمَيِّزُونَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْعَرْشِ. If you saw God, how would you tell the difference between him and the arsh? وَهُوَ دُونَهُ سُبْحَانَهُ بِالرُّؤْيَةِ. According to you, the arsh is below him. So when you see the arsh, which is below God, and you see God, according to you, that you're going to see him, how could you tell the difference between God and the arsh, which is below him and he's above it? Meaning, there's a barrier between you and God. أَتُمَيِّزُونَ بَيْنَهُمَا بِالشَّكْلِ وَالصُّورَةِ أَمْ بِاللَّوْنِ وَالْهَيْئَةِ. Would you tell the difference between the arsh and God, according to you, by shape and picture, or by color and form? وَمِنْ أَصْلِكُمْ أَنَّ الْمَرْئِيَّ شَرْطُهُ أَنْ يَكُونَ فِي مُقَابَلَةِ الرَّائِي. Your fundamental convictions is that the seen one, in order to be seen, would be counterposition to the seer. So how would you see God when the arsh is below him, according to you, and the arsh is over you? So there's a barrier between the two of you. وَكَيْفَ يَرَى الْقَدِيمُ نَفْسَهُ سُبْحَانَهُ. And according to you, since the only way to see something is to see something across from you, how would God see himself? وَكَيْفَ يَرَى الْكَائِنَاتِ مَعَ اسْتِتَارِ بَعْضِهَا بِبَعْضٍ. And how would God see the existing things when some of them are behind others? Like you have a heart in your chest, so it's behind your flesh, behind your rib cage. How would God see that according to you, when your belief is that the only thing that can be seen is something that's across from the seer? فَلَا يَرَى عَلَى هَذَا الْأَصْلِ بُطُونَ الْأَشْيَاءِ. According to this creed of yours, God should not see the insides of things. وَهَذَا خِلَافُ مَا عَلَيْهِ الْمُسْلِمُونَ. And this is different from what the Muslims believe. وَإِذَا كَانَ الْعَرْشُ دُونَهُ فَلَا يَحْجُبُهُ عَنَّا حَالَةَ الرُّؤْيَةِ. That statement there, I'm not sure. قال الأستاذ أبو إسحاق. Ustad Abu Ishaq said, مَنْ رَأَى اللَّهَ تَعَالَى فَلَا يَرَى مَعَهُ غَيْرَهُ. Anyone who saw God, exalted is he, won't see anything else while seeing him. أي في حال رؤيته للحق. Meaning, while he sees the real God, he won't see anything else. فاندفع السؤال على هذا الجواب. And this statement of Ustad Abu Ishaq would answer all these questions of the opponent. Although we don't say this, but that's an answer according to some Sunni theologians, that when Allah is seen, nothing else is seen. But others, they said there is no impossibility to seeing God who's not like the creations, and seeing creations also, and this doesn't mean God is like the creations. Meaning that when seeing God, one could see creations also. There's no impossibility. There's no contradiction in both matters here. Intaha, end quote. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. Do you have any question I can answer for you?
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I really ain't a question. It sound like this is the Wahhabis. They sound like, to me, sound like the atheists.
They are atheists. They're unwitting atheists. What makes them atheists is that they don't believe in the existence of something without a place. So that means they really don't believe in God's existence. So that makes them atheists. But they think God exists. Huh?
I said that's what I came up with.
Yeah.
They don't really believe in God, but they do believe in God exists.
Yeah.
But the atheists, they don't believe in God. But the atheists think that order that there's a God, I must see him. And that's what these dudes sound like.
Yes. Yeah, they are a type of atheist. MashaAllah. The scholar said if anyone believes that God is in a place, he can't even prove that God exists. Whatever he tries to prove that God exists, sorry. Whoever believes God is in a place, he can't prove that the world is created. Sorry. I still didn't say it right, maybe. Whoever believes God is in a place can't prove that the world is created. That's what the scholar said. Because whatever he says to prove that the world is created is going to apply to what he worships.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
The person you last mentioned, you said Hafiz Abu Ishaq.
Yeah. Al-Isfarayini.
Oh, Al-Isfarayini. That's the one that debated the Mushabbiha. It was explaining how Allah doesn't exist in a place.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Wafiyyah.
Was he also the Shaykh of Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari?
I don't recall him being a Shaykh of. I don't think so. He's an Ash'ari himself.
Oh, okay.
He's Shaykh of Abu Mansur al-Baghdadi.
Okay.
Who's Shaykh of Abu al-Muzaffar al-Isfarayini.
Okay.
No.
All right. Barakallahu fiik.
Ameen wa fiik. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.